curious, sir. After all these years, audiences most certainly are when it comes to Disney's 1951 animated Alice in Wonderland film. With its fantastical lands and eccentric characters, it's an unforgettable journey that enchants us every time we watch it. I'm Brittany with Channel Federator, and we're here to take you back down that rabbit hole to relive the classic animated tale. Whether you've seen it a million times or just wondered if it's worth the watch, we've got something for everyone with our 107 facts you should know about Alice in Wonderland. Let's get started. Disney's Alice in Wonderland is based on not one, but two books written by author Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and its sequel, Through the Looking Glass. One way Disney merged the stories is seen in the character, the Queen of Hearts. She's actually a combination of the Queen of Hearts in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and the Red Queen from Through the Looking Glass. Additionally, Tweedledee and Tweedledum are characters that appear exclusively in Through the Looking Glass. Lewis Carroll was the author's pen name. His real name was Charles Dodgson, a mathematician at Oxford. Carroll based Alice's character on his friend Henry Liddell's daughter. Henry Liddell was also a dean at Oxford University where Carroll taught math. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was the result of a picnic on a riverbank that the author had with Liddell's daughters, Edith, Lorena, and Alice. The author entertained the girls by creating stories for them on the spot. One of these stories centered around Alice, who loved the story he created for her so much she asked Carroll to write it down for her. Thus, the initial manuscript for what would become Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was born. The real-life Alice wasn't actually blonde, but a brunette. The real Alice has been portrayed in fiction almost as many times as the fictional version herself. It's said that Carroll based many of his characters off of real people. In fact, the dodo bird is based off of Carroll himself. In the novel, the bird has a stutter, much like Carroll did in real life. The decision to make a bird a dodo was based on how the author's stutter affected his own pronunciation of his real last name, de Dodgson. Get it? De Dodgson. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was first published in 1865, making the story just over 150 years old as of 2016. The Alice in Wonderland book underwent a title change. The Lewis Carroll classic was first called Alice's Adventures Underground when it was first presented in 1864. While Disney's Alice in Wonderland might be a definitive film adaptation of Alice's novels, it was not the first. It was beaten to the punch 48 years earlier with a live-action adaptation of the first novel. The film was produced in Britain and it had a runtime of 12 minutes long, making it one of the longest films produced in Britain at the time. Disney was fond of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland growing up and always planned on acquiring the rights to the story someday. Carroll's works played a part in the Walt Disney Studios' origins. Back in 1920s, Walt Disney created a series of silent short films known as Alice comedies, which placed a live-action actress into an animated setting, akin to films like Mary Poppins and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The first of these films was titled Alice's Wonderland. Prior to Disney's interpretation of the Alice stories, various productions had struggled with creating an adaptation of the story that worked well on screen. Walt believed that this was because the studios behind the adaptations were just incorporating absolutely everything from Carroll's novels into the films, regardless of whether it served the story in a meaningful way or not. Disney believed that you had to somewhat diverge from the source material but respect it and maintain the spirit of Lewis Carroll. Before creating Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt Disney considered making a live-action animated hybrid adaptation of Alice in Wonderland with a live-action Alice exploring an animated world much like the aforementioned Alice comedies. He scrapped the idea after Paramount released their own adaptation of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland in 1933. The live-action animated hybrid version Disney originally envisioned got as far as color screen tests featuring actress Mary Pickford. Walt didn't think audiences would relate to Carroll's written Alice character on the big screen. He felt the character was too unsympathetic for a 10-year-old girl. Despite his love of the story, Walt actually was reluctant to follow through with an Alice in Wonderland animated feature. He knew the book lacked a linear plot, something the writers attempted to make up for in jokes and wild musical numbers. Ultimately, it was the animation team that persuaded Walt into making Alice in Wonderland. Due to the recent success of Cinderella, he decided to take a chance and let the animators have their fun. In an attempt to satisfy his urge to create an animated version of Alice in Wonderland, Walt Disney created a Mickey Mouse short in 1936 called Through the Mirror, which begins with Mickey fast asleep with a copy of Through the Looking Glass. Then he begins to dream and embarks on an adventure that contains plot elements reminiscent of Lewis Carroll novels. Walt Disney's desire to create Alice in Wonderland was subtly and cleverly first shown in Pinocchio as an Easter egg 11 years before the film was released. When Jiminy Cricket sings When You Wish Upon a Star, the spines of two books can be seen to the left of him, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan. It wasn't until 1947 1947 that Disney was able to purchase the screen rights to both Alice novels. Due to the 1933 live-action feature release, Paramount Studios still had the rights to the story. However, it was back in 1938 when Walt registered the title and hired Al Perkins and David S. Hall to help develop the storyline and look of the animation. By 1939, the story reel for the animation motion picture was complete. Originally, Walt thought David Hall's artwork would be too difficult to animate because it resembled the sketchy nature of the original illustrations. Disney also wasn't really fond of the script Perkins wrote either. This, combined with the economic strain of World War II, had once again caused Disney to withhold production on Alice in Wonderland. Disney picked up steam on the project once again in 1947 when he commissioned a rewrite on the script by British author Aldous Huxley. The script was a very literal adaptation, so Disney punched it up with musical scores, whimsical scenery, and added more comic relief. Disney ordered that the classic characters to be revised, but still resemble the original design. Although the Tenniel illustrations were hugely famous at the time, the drawings were far too sketchy for animation in the Technicolor process. Many of the animal characters in the film were far more realistic in the book. The walrus, March Hare, and White Rabbit were all redesigned to have human features. The Alice design was simplified to save time. She was made to look younger, cleaner, lankier, and the costume patterns more minimal due to Technicolor complications. Disney animators did change around certain characters in the story. The funny doorknob was the only character Disney added to the story. And the talking doorknob wasn't the only sentient object in the entrance to Wonderland. Originally, the Drink Me bottle had a voice and personality before creators decided to add the doorknob instead. Since the original source material didn't really have much of a traditional story structure or plot to speak of, animators at Disney decided that they would instead base the movie around the old adage, "Be careful what you wish for." The Alice in Wonderland story contained too many characters to include in the Disney feature. According to Walt, introducing every character about a minute apiece would have taken up the entire feature. Huxley didn't exactly knock his first draft out of the park. Walt Disney thought it was too intellectual for audiences and rejected it. Sorry, dude. Huxley's draft incorporated Lewis Carroll as an actual character in the film's story. The draft was titled Alice and the Mysterious Mr. Carroll. While the author was still a prominent character in the film, writer-artist Joe Grant wanted Carroll to be played by Harold Lloyd, while Walt wanted Cary Grant to portray him. In 1945, Walt Disney announced that Ginger Rogers would be his Alice before changing his mind and temporarily choosing Luana Patton, who had previously worked with Disney on Song of the South, where she played Jenny. An actress named Lisa Davis Waltz was also considered at one point, but was eventually dropped as well. Lisa would work with Disney in the future as Anita in Disney's 101 Dalmatians.
Hey everybody, taking a quick break from Wonderland because we here at Channel Frederator want to hear from you. You clearly love cartoons, but are we covering all the ones that you like? We want to know. In the description you'll find a link to our survey, and we'll be giving everybody who completes it a 5% discount to StashRiot.com. And as an added bonus, we're giving away one free StashRiot.com gift card to any qualified participant who completes the survey. Terms and conditions apply. All you have to do is click the link below and fill it out. It's that easy. So help us out by letting us know what you want to see, because remember, Frederator loves you. And now, let's travel back down the rabbit hole.
Walt auditioned over 200 actresses for the role of Alice before settling on the voice we all know and love today. The role of Alice's voice would go to a young actress by the name of Catherine Beaumont. After Alice in Wonderland, Beaumont went on to voice Wendy Darling in Disney's Peter Pan. Disney discovered Beaumont after seeing her in MGM's On an Island with You and was so impressed with her performance that he invited her to audition for the role of Alice. According to Beaumont, Walt chose her for the role because he believed she had a voice that was pleasant to both American and British ears. Beaumont was only 10 years old when she got the part of Alice. The actress still had to do mandatory schoolwork for 3 hours, so there was a teacher on set at Disney with her. The history lesson during the caucus race was moved to the opening scene of the picture. Walt thought it gave the story more coherence and made Alice's descent into Wonderland more dramatic. The Jabberwock was written into earlier versions of the script, but was later removed because of its frightening nature. The Duchess was also written into an early version of the film. A sequence from the book was drawn featuring the Duchess and her whining baby, but the scene was found unfavorable and the character was later absorbed into the Queen of Hearts. An early story concept had Alice's cat, Dina, wandering into the Wonderland and getting lost. Dina would be transformed into the Cheshire Cat and journey with Alice, the Mad Hatter, and the March Hare through Wonderland. Disney's Alice in Wonderland was being developed at the exact same time as Disney's Cinderella. Walt saw it as something of a race to see which team could finish the film first. No pressure, guys. Despite the friendly competition, there were quite a few Disney animators that worked on both Alice in Wonderland and Cinderella concurrently. Animator Les Clark animated both at times while Mark Davis had his hand in animating Alice and Cinderella's stepsisters. Disney animator Ward Kimball based the design of the sneaky and suspicious Cheshire Cat on the work he did for Lucifer, the villainous cat in Disney's Cinderella. Beaumont isn't the only person with a direct connection between Alice and Wendy Darling. Animator Don Lusk had his hand in animating both of those characters. Lusk was an animator on 13 of Disney's animated features, his first also being Walt Disney's first, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It is said that the film's animation was inspired in part by Spanish surrealist painter Salvador Dali. Because of Mad Hatter's card marked 10/6, fans dubbed October 6th Mad Hatter's Day, but the card is even a simpler meaning than that. It was actually just the price of the hat, marked 10 shillings and 6 pence, as explained in Carol's book, The Nursery Alice. The March Hare's name is derived from the saying mad as a March hare, which basically means that one is out of their mind and not thinking straight. The saying itself is based on the erratic behavior European hares exhibit during March, which marks the beginning of their mating season. During the Mad Tea Party scene, the Mad Hatter poses Alice with the question, "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" to which neither of them have the answer to. This riddle was subject to much debate in the original novel, and despite the author flat out admitting that there was no answer to the nonsensical question, he later created one in an 1896 re-release of the novel with the answer, because it can produce a few notes, though they are flat and it is never put with the wrong end in front. This proved unsatisfactory to the fan base, so they set out to find the real answer, with some still searching to this day. And the sequences in which Alice grows and shrinks are based on a rare condition Carol suffered from, where migraines cause people to perceive the proportions of object in themselves either bigger or smaller than they actually are. The condition is sometimes called Todd syndrome, but the name Alice in Wonderland syndrome has become something of an official name as well. While they were featured in Through the Looking Glass, Tweedledee and Tweedledum's role in the film replaced that of two characters found in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, known as Mock Turtle and the Griffin. These two characters were replaced because Walt Disney did not find them at all amusing when translating from the page to the screen. Like many other Disney films, the filmmakers used the actors of Alice in Wonderland for more than just their voices. The actors would actually act out their scenes on a soundstage where it would be filmed and shown to the animators so they could use their live action footage as a point of reference when it came time to work their magic. Seeing as how the filmmakers shot reference footage of the actors performing the scenes, Alice was designed after Beaumont herself. Much like how Alice is a reflection of Beaumont, the Mad Hatter was designed to resemble his voice actor, comedian Ed Wynn. The Mad Hatter's dialogue during the unbirthday party scene is actually taken from the test footage shot as reference for the animators, not the dialogue from the recording booth sessions. Walt decided to use Wynn's dialogue from the test footage because he felt the comedian's performance was much stronger in that medium. And the sequence where the Mad Hatter attempts to fix the White Rabbit's watch was a result of an ad-lib made by Wynn while he was taking a break during a recording session. His rambling caught the attention of a bystanding Walt Disney who liked what he heard. Having noticed the tapes were coincidentally still rolling while this improv occurred, Walt told his sound technicians they could incorporate it into the film. They responded by saying Wynn's speech was unusable due to the large amount of background noise in the recording. Walt simply told the technicians, "That's your problem." Though through much work, Walt Disney was proven right and the speech was incorporated into the film, sounding crystal clear. Originally, the Drink Me bottle was going to be the personified object that Alice met at the beginning of her journey, but the filmmakers settled on making the doorknob the inanimate object Alice interacts with. Back when the Drink Me bottle was a talking character, it was voiced by Cliff Edwards, better known for playing Jiminy Cricket in Disney's Pinocchio. The man behind Cheshire Cat's voice, Sterling Holloway, was one of the most valued assets in Disney's voice acting arsenal. The actor portrayed Kaa the Snake in Jungle Book, Adult Flower in Bambi, the Stork in Dumbo and Roquefort, and even Winnie the Pooh. Playing the Queen of Hearts was a change of tone for voice actress Verna Felton, who had previously voiced the warm and loving Disney characters like Cinderella's fairy godmother and Dumbo's mother. The caterpillar was played by Richard Hayden, best known for his role of Uncle Max in The Sound of Music. The performance of White Rabbit marked actor Bill Thompson's Disney feature debut. He would later go on to voice many other characters for the studio, starting with Mr. Smee in Peter Pan, Jock and Lady and the Tramp, and Uncle Waldo in The Aristocrats. Alice in Wonderland was the final film for the man behind the King of Hearts, Dink Trout, who sadly passed away a year before the film even hit theaters. While Disney's Alice in Wonderland has the biggest cast of characters out of the Disney animated features, even with all the ones they cut. It is also the first Disney animated feature to credit the film's voice talent on screen. This would never occur again until the release of Disney's Jungle Book in 1967. Several songs that were written for the film were never used, including the original Cheshire Cat song, I'm Odd, that was originally written in place of Twas Brillig. Original production began in 1946, and Alice in Wonderland took approximately 5 years to complete. This was mostly due to the fact that Disney shot live-action footage of their films first to use as reference. 800 gallons of paint were used to color the film, including over 1,000 different shades of watercolor. That's enough paint to color the outside of around 135 average-sized houses. 30 songs were written for the feature, 14 of which actually appear in the film. That's the highest number of songs in any Disney feature to date. The White Rabbit's watch watch never changes. Every time the watch is seen, the time shows 12:25. Look closely at the dodo bird's flame when he lights his pipe in the White Rabbit's house. A hidden Mickey can be spotted within the flame. During the Walrus and Carpenter scene, the R flashes in the word March on the Mother Oyster's calendar. This is a reference to the Old English saying about only eating oysters in the months that have an R in the name. Mock turtle soup is actually a real dish. It was popular during the Victorian times and consisted of calf meat. The fish in the Walrus and Carpenter scenes are reused. The same fish watched Pinocchio hunt for the whale in the 1940s classic. A grand total of over 350,000 drawings and paintings were utilized in making Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland was a huge collaborative effort of over 750 artists. If you watch carefully, you'll notice that the Queen's henchmen only have heart-face cards, and non-heart-face cards were excluded. This represented that the Queen wasn't playing with a full deck, so to speak. The film was scored by Oliver Wallace, who also worked on scores for other Disney animated classics like Peter Pan, Cinderella, and Dumbo, for which he received an Academy Award. Most of the songs featured in the film utilized lyrics from poems written by Carol that appeared in the Alice books. Both a song and a sequence were developed for the creature known as the Jabberwocky from Lewis Carroll's nonsense poem. Walt Disney would go on to cut all references to the creature from the film. The deleted Jabberwocky song was to be performed by comedian Stan Freberg, who would go on to voice Beaver in Lady and the Tramp. The film originally contained a scene where Alice met with the White Knight, a character from Through the Looking Glass.
The Disney interpretation of the character was meant to be a caricature of Walt himself, and helped Alice out of her predicament in the Told You Would.
Though he liked the scene, Walt demanded the scene be cut on the grounds that he thought Alice should get out of the situation on her own.
The sequence where Alice is lost in Told You Woods and terrified by bizarre creatures was actually a scene created for the Disney film, as the animators thought Alice didn't encounter enough conflict in the novels.
The caucus race in the film is a playful reference to the term for a political situation where a group of politicians get together and yell at each other to the point where the meeting becomes nonsensical and utterly pointless. The dates on the calendar seen during The Walrus and the Carpenter are the same as they would be in March of 2010, which, strangely enough, was the month and year that Tim Burton's live-action remake of the film was released. The manner in which the walrus lures the oysters by playing his cane like a flute is not in the original story, but is highly reminiscent of the tale of the Pied Piper, in which the titular characters lure pests and children away from their town by using the tunes on his musical pipe. In a drastic change from films like Pinocchio and Dumbo, Alice in Wonderland featured something of an anti-smoking message for the first time in a Disney film in the form of the caterpillar. While quite a few characters in the books are portrayed as smokers, the caterpillar is the only character seen smoking in the film. When he does it, it has a negative effect on Alice, causing her to cough. This is distinctly unlike the Disney films previously mentioned, which featured the act as something casual. Alice in Wonderland was the first Disney film to use the power of television to promote a Disney animated feature. On Christmas in 1950, Disney aired an hour-long special that focused on the making of Alice in Wonderland titled 1 Hour in Wonderland. Predating even Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, 1 Hour in Wonderland was Disney's first ever television broadcast. Distributor Sylvain Selective Films released a feature-length puppet version of Alice in Wonderland directed by French filmmaker Lou Bunin. Disney attempted to sue the company and pushed the release of the film away from their intended release date, but the judge ruled in favor of Sylvain Selective, citing the release of their film as a healthy competition for Disney. Luckily for Disney, Bunin's version performed poorly at the box office regardless. It is speculated that the White Rabbit's watch represents what's left of Alice's grasp on reality. Once the watch is destroyed, then the character is fully immersed in Wonderland. While it may be hard to believe in this day and age, Alice in Wonderland was actually considered a failure when it was first released in 1951. Walt Disney had even completely detached himself from the film, denying direct involvement and claiming it was never his idea to create it. Walt Disney personally disliked the film because he thought Alice had lack of heart. He also thought the film had way too many characters. Animator Ward Kimball felt that the film fell apart because Walt assigned 5 directors to the project and allowed each of them to produce their own part of the story, with the intent of each director being to outdo the other 4. This may explain why people thought the film was so disjointed back in the day. Alice in Wonderland was a box office bomb whose performance just paled in comparison to Disney's previous success, Cinderella. It's speculated that if it weren't for Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland would have caused the Disney Animation Studio to file for bankruptcy. That's insane. Despite the film's sour reputation, the film was nominated for Best Music at the Academy Awards. While Alice in Wonderland was a flop at the box office, it prevailed on a relatively new medium that was steadily rising in the 1950s, television. Walt Disney used his Wonderful World of Color programming block to air Alice in Wonderland, where the film received millions of viewers nationwide. It was the first theatrically released Disney film to air on television. Alice in Wonderland made quite the impact on Disney's theme parks, the film's biggest contribution to Disney's tourism empire being the nauseating Mad Tea Party. The ride was one of Disneyland's opening attractions way back in 1955 and still operates there to this day. Mad Tea Party is one of the few attractions to be featured in every Disney theme park around the world, but it goes by quite a few different names depending on where you are. In California's Disneyland and Florida's Walt Disney World, world, it goes by Mad Tea Party. In Tokyo's Disneyland, it's referred to Alice's Tea Party, while in Disneyland Paris, it goes by Mad Hatter's Teacups. Hong Kong Disneyland's name is practically identical to Disneyland's Paris, but it's grammatically non-possessive, making it Mad Hatter's Teacups. Alice in Wonderland continued to have an influence on Disney films more than half a century after it was released. King Candy from Disney Animation Studios' Wreck-It Ralph was designed to resemble the Mad Hatter, and his voice actor Ed Wynn, both visually and vocally.
In fact, Alan Tudyk landed the role almost solely on his ability to imitate the late comedian.
For the 60th anniversary re-release of Alice in Wonderland, Disney revived one of the cut songs that was performed by Cheshire Cat called I'm Odd. Funnily enough, the song is performed by voice actor Jim Cummings, who has taken over the mantle of another Disney character originally voiced by the late Sterling Holloway, Winnie the Pooh. Beaumont would reprise the role of Alice 51 years later for Square Enix and Disney's joint venture, Kingdom Hearts. To accompany the 1951 release of Alice in Wonderland, 2 comic books were published. One was a fun adaptation of the movie, and the other chronicled new adventures of Alice and her friends. It took over 20 years before Alice in Wonderland made a theatrical re-release. This was only because the interest in the film had finally grown, as it was proclaimed to reflect the psychedelic culture of the time. In 1974, the film eventually became Disney's top requested 16mm film rental. Afterwards, the studio took it upon itself to reissue the film nationally. Although the film wasn't popular among the time of its release, it was still revolutionary as far as animation is considered. Never before had a Disney movie been as vibrant in color, nor had that many characters been animated in a single scene at once.